One wrong sentence, that's all it takes. One careless comment, one impulsive remark, and something you've spent years building, your reputation, your relationships, your opportunities, can fall apart in seconds. People underestimate words, but words are powerful. They shape how the world sees you and how you see yourself. Every sentence you speak is either building your future or quietly sabotaging it. Stoicism teaches us something that many never realize. Real strength isn't in having the perfect comeback. It's in knowing when silence is more powerful than speech. Because mastering your words isn't about talking better, it's about living better. It's about self-respect, emotional control, and commanding presence without having to raise your voice. So if you've ever felt like your words betrayed you, or like you lost something important just because you couldn't hold your tongue, this video is for you. Today I'll walk you through 10 timeless Stoic principles to help you stop hurting yourself with your own voice. You'll learn how to speak with purpose, when to hold back, and why silence, used wisely, commands more respect than any speech ever could. But before we begin, let me tell you a story about someone who didn't understand this until it was too late. His name was Lucas, and he learned the hard way that words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. Lucas always had something to say. He was sharp, witty, and quick with a remark. In school it made him popular. In meetings it made him entertaining. And for a while he believed it made him powerful. His voice was his weapon, and he used it often, even when he didn't need to. By his late 20s, Lucas was working at a creative agency. He was well-liked, known for being funny, clever, spontaneous. He had a seat at the table, a growing career, and a reputation for being the life of the room. But everything changed in a single meeting. It was a pitch for a major client, a mental health brand with strict messaging, high stakes, and months of preparation behind it. Tension filled the room. Everyone knew they had to get it right, and in the middle of the presentation, Lucas cracked a joke. He didn't mean harm, it just slipped out. One of those lines you think will lighten the mood until you realize the room isn't laughing. The client's face stayed frozen. His colleagues shifted uncomfortably. The meeting ended early. No one said much. The next day, the agency got the call. The client was pulling out. The reason? That one offhand comment. Just like that, weeks of work were gone. The deal vanished. And Lucas? He wasn't the charming guy anymore. He was the reason they lost the account. The one who couldn't read the room. The one who didn't know when to stop. And worse, no one defended him. Not one teammate reached out. Not a single message of support. Just a short note from his manager. Take some time. Reflect. That night, Lucas sat in his living room still wearing his work clothes. No music, no distractions, just silence. And a growing awareness that something inside him had cracked. It wasn't just about the job. It was the realization that his need to speak, to stand out, to always say something, was the very thing pushing people away. He didn't know who he was anymore. He just felt empty. Until his eyes landed on a book his sister had left on the coffee table. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. He opened it randomly, just to escape the noise in his head, and the first sentence he read stopped him cold. Think before you speak. Often silence is the best answer. It hit him harder than any lecture ever could, because for the first time he understood, silence isn't weakness, it's strength. It's not about holding back out of fear. It's about choosing your words with discipline, because you respect your voice too much to waste it. That was the turning point. He started listening more, thinking twice before speaking, asking himself, is this necessary? Is this helpful? Or am I just reacting? Slowly, things began to shift. Not because he tried to impress people, but because he no longer needed to. People invited him back, not because he talked more, but because when he finally spoke, it was worth listening to. He became someone whose words had weight, because they came from a place of control. Lucas didn't become someone else. He became someone better. And it all started the moment he realized that his words weren't free. They were costly. That what you say can build trust or break it. That silence isn't the absence of strength. It's the presence of self-mastery. And that's exactly what I want to show you in this video. How to develop that same mastery. How to speak less, with more purpose. How to stop reacting and start leading with your presence, with your control, and with the wisdom that comes from Stoic practice. Now let's begin with the first lesson, a question that could change everything. Do you really have to say that? Let me ask you a question that might sting a little, but could completely shift how you move through the world. Do you really have to say that? Not everything you think needs to come out of your mouth, even if you're right, even if you're angry, even if the urge is burning inside you. Because here's the truth. When you speak on impulse, your words don't just express your thoughts, they reveal your control or lack of it. We like to think of our voice as a tool, but for many people it's more like a weapon they haven't learned how to handle. One stray sentence, and suddenly you've created damage you never intended. Hurt feelings, broken trust, a shattered image. It's like walking around with a loaded weapon in your hands. You think you're defending yourself, but you're really just creating chaos, even in your own life. And the damage doesn't show up right away. Sometimes it takes hours, days, or even years before you realize that the thing standing in your way wasn't someone else's action. It was something you said without thinking. Learning to control what you say starts with one simple truth. Not every reaction deserves a response. Not every opinion needs to be shared. Not every emotion needs to be verbalized right away. Imagine this. You're in the kitchen. It's been a long, exhausting day. Your partner says you always leave a mess. You never help. You feel it immediately, that rush of heat in your chest. You want to snap back, you want to say something sharp, and maybe you do. Something like, "If it bothers you so much, do it yourself." Boom. Silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that signals something just broke. You know you didn't mean it, but it's out now. And it's not just the mess you'll have to clean up, it's the trust, the tone, the damage. That's the cost of reactive speech, of letting your tongue act before your mind can catch up. Now imagine another version of you, a Stoic version, one that breathes first, waits 3 seconds, doesn't respond from fire but from clarity. Maybe you don't say anything at all. Maybe you just nod, give yourself space, and come back later with intention. That's the version that wins, not the argument, but the moment. Because winning isn't about saying the last word. It's about knowing when silence is the better one. Here's the science behind it. When you feel attacked, your brain activates its oldest, most primitive part, the reptilian brain. It's built for survival, not for reasoning. So it throws out words like arrows, fast and unfiltered. But if you pause, even for a few seconds, you give your rational brain time to step in, and just like that, a potential argument becomes a mature conversation, or no conversation at all, just peace. That pause is your power, so here are 3 simple ways to practice it starting today. First, when the urge to speak rises, wait 3 seconds. Just 3. Breathe. That space can save your relationships, your reputation, and your peace of mind. Second, ask yourself, is this building something? Or am I just trying to offload my emotion? If it's just emotional release, hit pause. Let it settle before you speak. Third, have an emergency phrase ready. Something neutral that buys you time, like, "Let me think about that." It's polite, it's powerful, and most importantly, it gives you control. Because learning to control what you say isn't just about being more articulate. It's about being more intentional, more stable, more respected. Every time you resist the urge to speak out of frustration, that's a win. And those invisible wins, they're what build emotional strength. The kind of strength people trust, admire, and follow. So the next time you feel that urge rising, ask yourself again, honestly, do I really need to say this? Or will my silence say more? Stop telling everyone your plans. Let's be honest, most of us love to talk about what we're going to do. New goals, big ideas. That project we're finally going to start next Monday. There's something exciting about saying it out loud. It makes us feel committed, motivated, even validated. But here's the trap. The more you talk about what you're going to do, the less likely you are to actually do it. That might sound backward, but it's been proven again and again. When you speak your intentions before taking action, your brain gets a premature reward. It tricks you into thinking you've already made progress, when in reality you've only made noise. And noise doesn't build anything. I used to fall into this trap constantly. I'd get excited about a new skill or career move and tell everyone around me. One time, I told a coworker I was signing up for a professional course. something that would qualify me for a big opportunity, better pay, more growth. I'd already done the research, talked to the advisor, picked out the schedule. All I needed to do was click confirm. I told him expecting support. Maybe "that's awesome, you've got this." Instead, he laughed. "You? That's way out of your league. You barely handle the tools we already use." At first I played it cool, but the damage had been done. Doubt crept in. I hesitated. Then I let the deadline pass. I didn't take the course. A few weeks later, I found out that same coworker had taken it himself and landed the job I was aiming for. That was the day I stopped sharing my plans. Not because I became secretive, but because I realized something important. Your vision is fragile in the early stages. And exposing it to careless people, even with good intentions, can break it before it has a chance to grow. Stoicism teaches us that inner strength doesn't announce itself. It builds in silence. Marcus Aurelius didn't write meditations for applause. He wrote it as a private reminder to act, not to impress. So what does that mean for you? It means you need to protect your plans, not perform them. When you talk about a goal, ask yourself, am I sharing this to gain approval or to stay accountable? If it's the first, stay quiet. If it's the second, make sure you're talking to someone who will actually hold you to it, not someone who will smile and secretly hope you fail. Here's a better way to stay motivated. Write it down. Keep a private notebook or phone note just for your goals. Review it daily. Let it fuel you, not feed others' opinions. Speak only to people who are builders, not spectators. People who'll challenge you, not clap for you. People who ask, how's it going? Not just, what are you planning? And most importantly, change your language. Stop saying, I'm going to, and start saying, I'm working on it. Or better yet, say nothing. Let your results do the talking. Think about a rocket. Before it launches, there's silence. Behind the scenes, calculation, refinement, pressure. No announcements, no noise. But when it finally moves, the world feels it. That's how your progress should be. Quiet while it's building. Loud when it arrives. So ask yourself, are you sharing because you need applause? Or are you building something real, something strong, something unshakable? Because if it's real, you won't need to talk about it. You'll just live it. Those who listen understand more. Have you ever been talking to someone, really opening up, and halfway through you can tell they've stopped listening? They're nodding, sure. Maybe throwing in the occasional yeah or wow. But their eyes aren't on you. Their mind is just waiting for its turn to speak. And when you finally pause, they hit you with, that reminds me of when I... Just like that, the spotlight shifts. Your story disappears. And you realize something most people learn the hard way. Listening is rare, and that's exactly why it's powerful. In today's world, everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to be right. Everyone's got an opinion, a microphone, a post, but hardly anyone listens. And that is your advantage. If you can become the person who actually listens, who really pays attention, who holds space instead of jumping in, you will immediately stand out in a world that's full of noise. You don't even have to say much. Your silence becomes a presence. Your calm becomes a magnet. And when someone feels genuinely heard, something shifts inside them. Their walls come down. Their trust goes up. And the connection deepens, not because you said the perfect words, but because you didn't interrupt their truth. That's what most people miss. You don't gain influence by talking more. You gain it by listening better. Real listening is more than just being quiet. It's being fully present. It means putting your phone away, looking them in the eyes. Responding with care, not just with phrases. It's reflecting what they said, not repeating it, but showing them, I see you. I understand. You want to build trust quickly? Say something like, so what I'm hearing is, or it sounds like this really matters to you. Those small intentional phrases have more power than most advice ever could, because it's not advice they needed, it was presence. Think back to the people you respect most, a teacher, a mentor, maybe a friend. It's probably not what they said that stuck with you, it's how they made you feel. Heard, seen, respected. That's what true listening does. And here's something else. When you listen more, you speak better. You pick up patterns. You absorb insights. You understand not just what's being said, but what's not being said. So when you finally speak, your words carry clarity. They land. They help. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason," and that's not just poetic. It's a blueprint for becoming wiser. If you want to master your words, you must first master your ears. So here's how to start. First, be fully there. Let your eyes, your body, your focus show that you're paying attention. Second, reflect instead of redirecting. Don't make it about you. Make it about understanding them. And third, pause before responding. You don't need to fill every silence. Sometimes that pause says more than any reply ever could. Because when you stop entering conversations to prove something and start entering to understand, your words become rare. And what's rare becomes valuable. You don't need to speak constantly to be powerful. Sometimes real power is being the person in the room who listens, fully, quietly, and with purpose. Don't speak when you're burning inside. Picture yourself as a barrel filled to the brim with gasoline. Your stress, your anger, your frustration packed tight inside. Then someone, without meaning to, walks up and lights a spark. A careless comment, a criticism, a tone that hits you the wrong way. And before you even realize it, boom, the whole thing explodes. Not because they meant harm, but because you didn't pause. You didn't check the pressure. And that's exactly what happens when we speak while we're burning inside. When you talk in the heat of anger, your words don't come from wisdom, they come from pain. They don't solve problems, they create more. You might win the argument, but lose the relationship. You might release the emotion, but damage your peace. And afterward, you're left cleaning up the ashes, knowing deep down that if you had just waited 5 minutes, you would have handled it differently. Stoicism teaches us this clearly. Emotional control is not about suppressing your feelings, it's about mastering your response. Because when you're angry, you are not yourself. You are your reaction in disguise. And that version of you, the reactive, defensive, explosive one, is not the version that deserves the microphone. If you want to stop sabotaging yourself with your own voice, you have to learn this skill. Do not speak while your emotions are still driving the car. Step out of the moment, take a breath. If you're overwhelmed, move, physically. Leave the room, take a walk, drink some water, shake the energy off. Then, and only then, ask yourself, what was I really reacting to? Because most of the time it's not just that one comment or situation, it's a buildup, a bad week, a deep fear, an old hurt. And if you don't step back, you'll keep blowing up in the wrong direction, saying things that feel right in the heat of the moment but leave scars you can't take back. One practical exercise that can change your life is this. When you feel furious, open a note on your phone or grab a piece of paper and write exactly what you want to say. Say it all. Let it out. But don't send it. Don't speak it. Just write it. Then wait a few hours. When you come back and read it, you'll often feel surprised, maybe even embarrassed, at how different the situation looks through calm eyes. That's emotional detachment. That's power. Because it shows you that most of what we want to say when we're upset doesn't come from truth. It comes from the storm. And storms pass. So let them. If silence is your weapon, control is your shield. Use both. Because while anyone can speak when emotions are high, it takes real strength to stay silent when every part of you wants to lash out. But that silence, that pause, it might be the difference between ruining a relationship and strengthening it, between escalating chaos and choosing clarity. Don't speak while you're burning. Wait until the fire cools and let your words come from wisdom, not wounds. Not everyone deserves to see your vulnerable side. There's a fine line between being open and being exposed, and far too many people don't realize they've crossed it until it's too late. Have you ever shared something deeply personal, something raw, vulnerable, maybe even painful, with someone you thought you could trust, only to have it used against you later? It doesn't always come from malice. Sometimes it's just a careless joke in front of others, a passing comment that reveals what you told in confidence. And suddenly your pain is no longer yours. It's been turned into entertainment. And the worst part, you handed it over willingly. Not because you were weak, but because you were searching for something, connection, relief, maybe even healing. But the Stoics knew what we often forget. Your vulnerability is sacred. Not everyone deserves access to it. And revealing it to the wrong person doesn't make you brave. It leaves you bleeding in front of someone who doesn't know how to hold that wound with care. You're not meant to hide everything. but you are meant to filter what you share and with whom. Marcus Aurelius said not to worry about what others think of you, only what you think of yourself. That means your self-worth isn't measured by how many people know your struggles. It's measured by how you carry them with wisdom and strength, even in silence. Just because someone listens doesn't mean they're safe. Ask yourself, have they earned the right to know this part of me? Or are they just conveniently available? There's a big difference between someone being friendly and someone being loyal, and you won't know the difference until your story becomes gossip. One way to test this: share something small, something not too personal, then watch what they do with it. Do they protect it? Or does it find its way into the next conversation they have with someone else? Because if they can't respect the little things, they won't protect the big ones. And if you've already experienced betrayal like this, you're not broken. You're wiser now. You've learned that your story doesn't need to be on display for it to be real. You can process it quietly, journal it privately, cry through it alone or with someone who's truly earned your trust. Vulnerability doesn't need an audience. It needs protection, it needs awareness, and it needs boundaries. The goal isn't to shut down, it's to share from a place of strength, not desperation. To speak because you choose to, not because you're hoping someone else will carry your pain for you. Because in the end, some parts of you deserve to be guarded, not broadcasted. And the more you learn to keep sacred what's meant to be sacred, the more peace you'll feel. So remember, your story matters, but not everyone deserves a front row seat. Sometimes silence commands more than words. There's a kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't shout, it doesn't interrupt. It just sits there steady and unshakable. That's the power of silence. In a world addicted to noise, constant updates, opinions, explanations, choosing not to speak can be the most commanding move you make. Silence, when used with intention, isn't emptiness, it's presence. It says, I don't need to prove anything right now. It says, I'm in control. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best response to anger is silence, because when someone's yelling and you remain calm, you're not losing, you're leading. Your stillness becomes a mirror that forces the other person to see their own chaos. That's presence, and that's real strength. Think about it. When was the last time you walked into a heated situation, saw people arguing, raising their voices, and the one person who said nothing held the most power? Not because they didn't have something to say, but because they knew the value of restraint. That kind of silence doesn't come from passivity. It comes from discipline. From knowing you don't have to jump into every fight. You don't have to prove your intelligence with every reply. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is not to play the game at all. And here's a practical truth. When you pause instead of reacting, you shift the energy. You create space. You break the pattern. Whether it's a meeting, an argument, or a difficult question, the person who takes a breath before responding immediately feels more grounded, more thoughtful, more in control. And that moment of silence before you speak, that calm beat, is often worth more than the words that follow. It shows that you're not operating on impulse. You're thinking. You're steady. You're not just reacting. You're choosing. That alone earns you respect. If staying silent feels difficult, try this trick. Focus your awareness on something physical and subtle, like gently pressing your toes into the floor or relaxing your shoulders. This brings you back into your body and helps release that automatic urge to speak. And when you do decide to speak, your words will hit harder, not because they're louder, but because they came from stillness. When you learn to hold your silence with confidence, you become the person in the room who doesn't need to chase respect. People just give it. Not because you demanded it, but because you carried yourself with calm. So the next time you're tempted to speak just to fill the space, remember this. In a room full of noise, the one who masters silence commands the moment. And not by saying more, but by needing to say less. Your results matter more than your words. Talk is cheap. It always has been. In fact, the more someone needs to explain what they're going to do, the more likely it is that nothing actually gets done. We live in a culture that rewards big announcements and bold declarations, New Year's resolutions, public goals, personal promises shouted from the rooftops. But Stoicism reminds us that what really matters isn't what you say you'll do. It's what you actually do. Your results speak a language no one can argue with. You don't have to justify them. You don't have to explain them. You just live them and they say everything for you. Think about the people you respect most. They probably don't talk much about their plans. They just quietly execute. They're focused, grounded, and driven not by praise but by purpose. And that's the kind of energy Stoics teach us to cultivate. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." That sentence alone cuts through every excuse, every delay, every need for approval. Because in the end, your life is your proof, your consistency, your discipline, your follow-through. When you say less and do more, people notice. They respect you not because you're loud, but because you're real. And here's the hard truth. If you constantly feel the need to talk about your goals, chances are you're using your words as a substitute for action. It gives you the illusion of progress, while nothing around you actually changes. So, instead of telling everyone how you're going to get in shape, just show up at the gym. Instead of posting about your next big project, work on it quietly. Instead of repeating to yourself what you're going to become, start becoming it. You don't owe the world updates. You owe yourself results. And every minute you spend explaining your vision to people who don't share it is a minute stolen from the work it takes to bring it to life. Of course, there's a time for sharing when your results can teach, inspire, or lift others. But even then, the sharing is secondary. It's never the goal. The goal is to build a life so solid, so self-proving, that you no longer have to defend it. People will see the discipline in your routine. They'll feel the clarity in your presence. They'll respect the quiet confidence that comes from someone who no longer needs to say, "I will," because their actions already say, "I did." So let that be your reminder. The most powerful people don't over-explain. They don't try to impress. They just show up, do the work, and let their results speak for themselves. And in a world full of noise, that silence is the loudest statement you can make. Complaining won't save you. Complaining feels good for a moment. It's a release, a way to let the frustration spill out. But once that moment fades, you're left exactly where you started. Still stuck, still bitter, still powerless. Stoicism doesn't tell you to suppress your pain, it tells you to transform it. Because every time you complain, you reinforce the idea that you're a victim of your circumstances, instead of the architect of your response. Life will give you pain. It will give you setbacks, betrayal, failure, unfairness. But none of those things are improved by talking about them endlessly. Complaining may win you attention, but it never wins you respect. It never earns you strength. In fact, it quietly robs you of your power, because the more you complain, the less you act. The more you justify staying stuck, the harder it becomes to move forward. Marcus Aurelius could have complained about sickness, betrayal, war, or the immense pressure of ruling an empire. But he didn't. He wrote to himself, reminding his soul to remain steady, reminding himself that the obstacle is the way, that every difficulty is fuel for growth, not a signal to collapse. When you're tempted to complain, ask yourself this: what do I actually want? Do I want someone to fix it for me, or do I want to fix it myself? If it's the first, you'll stay waiting. If it's the second, you'll start working. That's the Stoic choice. Action over expression, change over comfort, strength over sympathy. This doesn't mean you never talk about your struggles. It means you stop rehearsing them. You stop identifying with them. You stop making them the main story. The strongest people don't pretend everything is fine. They just choose not to broadcast their pain for attention. They sit with it, work through it, and keep moving. They know that life owes them nothing, and they're not interested in waiting for it to feel fair. They're interested in becoming better regardless. So next time you feel the urge to complain, pause. Use that energy to take even the smallest action instead. One decision, one task, one quiet moment of discipline. Because that's how change begins, not with a rant, but with a step. And over time, those steps become strength, silent, steady strength that doesn't need applause. So remember this: complaining might feel like relief, but it's not a solution. And if you want a different life, you'll have to build it, not talk about why you don't have it. Silence is a test and a teacher. Silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's a mirror. It shows you things about yourself that you can't see when you're constantly speaking, scrolling, or reacting. And the truth is, most people are afraid of it. Because silence forces you to confront what's underneath the surface, the insecurity, the impatience, the fear of not being in control. But if you can learn to sit with that discomfort instead of trying to escape it, silence transforms from something awkward into something sacred. Stoicism teaches us that silence is both a test and a teacher. It tests your self-control. Can you hold your tongue when your ego wants to speak? Can you pause when everything in you wants to defend, explain, or attack? And at the same time, it teaches you patience, clarity, and power. Because in silence, you start to observe more. You notice how often others speak just to be heard. You notice how impulsive speech creates conflict, while thoughtful restraint builds respect. You notice how people reveal themselves not by what they say, but by what they can't stop themselves from saying. And when you become comfortable in silence, you become unshakable. You no longer feel the need to fill every gap. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room. You realize that silence gives you leverage. It gives you time to think, time to feel, time to choose your words instead of spilling them carelessly. And sometimes saying nothing is the most strategic move you can make. It creates space. It forces others to reflect. It keeps you grounded in your center while others spin in circles trying to get a reaction. That's not weakness, that's composure. And composure is rare. So the next time you're in a tough conversation or a high-pressure moment or someone pushes your buttons, remember this. Your silence is not a void. It's a position of strength. A pause is not a retreat. It's a recalibration. And in that pause, you find your true power. The ability to respond instead of react, to understand instead of explode, to rise above instead of sink to the same level. Learn to love silence. Make time for it. Let it shape your character. Because when you've mastered your silence, you've mastered yourself. And that's when your voice finally starts to matter. You don't have to justify everything you do. One of the most exhausting habits we pick up in life is the constant need to explain ourselves, to justify our choices, to defend our silence, to make sure everyone understands why we said no, why we walked away, why we changed our mind, or why we didn't respond. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone an explanation for living a life that's true to your values. The need to justify everything stems from fear. Fear of judgment, rejection, misunderstanding. And Stoicism teaches us to let that go. Because the moment you start making peace with who you are and what you stand for, you stop chasing approval from people who were never meant to understand you anyway. Not everyone needs to be on board with your decisions. Not everyone needs access to your reasons. Some things are private, some things are sacred, some things are meant to be felt deeply and shared sparingly. And the more you grow, the more you'll realize that peace comes not from defending your path, but from walking it, confidently, quietly, consistently. You can still be kind without over-explaining. You can still be respectful without apologizing for your boundaries. And if someone demands a justification for a decision that harms no one but protects your peace, ask yourself, do they care about you? Or do they just want control? Because people who truly respect you won't pressure you to explain your growth. They'll support it, even if they don't fully understand it. Marcus Aurelius didn't keep a public blog of every internal decision he made. He journaled privately. He refined his soul in silence. He lived with integrity and let his life speak for itself. You can do the same. Not every no needs a reason. Not every step forward needs to be narrated. And not every part of your life needs to be made palatable for others. So stop asking for permission to evolve. Stop shrinking your decisions down to make others comfortable. And most of all, stop draining your energy trying to justify a path they were never meant to walk. Your life is yours. Your choices are yours. And your silence, when chosen with confidence and clarity, becomes the loudest proof that you are finally free. You've just learned that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That speaking less doesn't mean you have less to say, it means you've learned to value your words. In a world full of noise, the ability to choose when to speak, how to speak and when to say nothing at all is a form of power that few people ever master. But you can. You now have 10 Stoic principles to guide you, not just in how you talk, but in how you carry yourself. Whether you're facing conflict, criticism, or just the chaos of everyday life, remember, your calm is your strength, your silence is your strategy, and your discipline is your freedom. So speak with intention, pause with purpose, and let the world hear not just your voice, but your presence. Because once you learn to control what you say, you'll start to master what truly matters: your mind, your peace, and your impact.